A family divided, a coup, lawsuits, and ultimately, murder. The story behind U-Haul is one of the darkest stories you'll ever hear. You see, this company started as a way to meet a need, but in time it became the thing that tore the founder's family apart and became the father's worst nightmare. Leonard Samuel Schoen, who we'll call LS, and his wife Anna Mary were young and in love, college sweethearts. LS could never have known that Anna Mary was the one thing holding together his short-lived happiness. It was the end of his time in World War II, and they were heading home and needed a trailer to haul all their belongings. Problem was, there weren't any. So they packed their car full of what they could, and on their drive, worked out a plan to create the business for themselves. One where people could rent a trailer in one city, travel a far distance to another city or even state, and leave it there in their new destination. They would use their total savings of $5,000 to fill this gap in the market. And in 1945, U-Haul was founded. Little did LS know that his new company of his would ultimately lead to his downfall. They started out by buying used trailers, but quickly found that they were more trouble than they were worth. So, he taught himself how to weld and began building them himself. It was at this time that he did something clever for the business. He approached gas station owners and convinced them to conduct U-Haul rentals from their locations in return for commission. The first trailers were rented out for just $2 a day. The business continued to expand their locations and fleet of trailers, eventually adding trucks as well. All was going well and the future looked bright, but nothing could have prepared LS for what lay ahead. On May 4th, 1957, at the age of 35, Anna Mary had a heart attack and died. His love and the mother of their 6 young children was gone. He had just told her the day before that he couldn't believe things were going so well. Then, when she died, he thought it was some sort of retribution for their success. It was always there in my mind. When Anna Mary died, I thought maybe we had paid the price, but we hadn't. There had been an equal partnership between LS and Anna Mary, so upon her death, her 50% stake in the company was divided up between their children. Having spent a majority of the last number of years on the road, LS didn't know how to care for their children. So, a year later, he married a 23-year-old woman whom he put in charge of his kids and continued on with his work in the business. And with her, he fathered 5 more children. He would go on to divorce her 19 years later, marry 3 more times, and father 2 more children. And throughout all of this, LS had managed to keep the business afloat. But a new crisis was coming, in a form that he least expected. His own children. You see, LS had been gifting his children generous percentages of his stock in the company for years, eventually, in the 80s, leaving himself with a mere 2% stake in the company. He later recalled a friend telling him, "Your problem from now on will be the management of greed." And this ended up being quite the prophetic statement, because all of his oldest children began vying for high-ranking positions within the company at the same time. The problem was they each seemed to have differing opinions on how the business should be run. There were even reports of physical fights during board meetings, and one case that resulted in charges being filed. LS and his oldest sons, Sam and Mike, were on the same side when it came to decisions regarding the business. But 2 of his other sons, Joe and Mark, were on a whole other side, heavily disagreeing with the direction the business was being taken in. This came to a front when LS began diversifying the business way past the confines of the original successful business plan. U-Haul began supplying dance floors and punch bowls, floor sanders, motorhomes, awnings, jet skis. Unfortunately for LS, all this did was confuse and turn off their loyal customer base. And this change ended up costing the business big. Net profits went down from $42 million in 1985 to $9.2 million in 1986, subsequently putting the business in $600 million debt and costing thousands of jobs within the company. This is where things spiraled out of control. Joe and Mark did something that would forever change the face of the business, as well as the family. The two sons decided to betray their father and held a coup in 1986, kicking him out of the company. LS agreed to step down as long as they would let Sam stay on in his position of CEO. Joe agreed, but made his brother's life miserable, forcing him to quit just a few weeks later. But LS and Sam weren't ready to give up on U-Haul, so in 1988 they hatched a plan to get back at Joe and regain control of the company. Joe wasn't going to take it lying down, and once he heard about their plans, he called it a hostile takeover and canceled his father's lifetime employment agreement, effectively ridding him of any retirement benefits. This fight was now personal, and it was during the ensuing legal battle over ownership of the company that something terrible happened. On the night of August 6, 1990, Sam's wife, Eva, was murdered. Sam was away on business at the time. LS's favorite daughter-in-law was dead, shot in the back with a .25 caliber pistol with a silencer. Sam offered a $250,000 reward to anyone with information regarding the murder. Authorities said the scene pointed to the work of a professional. LS's immediate thought was also that this was no accident or coincidence. But more than that, he told authorities and the public that Eva's death was the work of his sons, Joe and Mark. I believe one or both of these sons are indirectly responsible for Eva's death. I hope and pray that I'm wrong, but that's what I believe. He was convinced that they hired a hitman to kill Sam, killing Eva by accident when Sam wasn't home. Joe and Mark adamantly disputed the claims, even calling on the public to come forward with any information regarding the death of their sister-in-law. But with LS's unrelenting accusations being publicly thrown around, it started to affect the business. When a person makes the kind of statement like my dad, it has a great deal of credibility. People have to understand that LS Schoen is not a storybook father. He has a lot of personal demons of his own. And Joe and Mark couldn't sit by and allow it to continue, so they filed a libel suit against LS. Sure, he is my father, but I don't like some of the things he has done. We won't kiss and make up when the lawsuit is over. The two sons knew they were going to be at war with their father. Their relationship would be forever ruined. LS and Sam's plan to take back the company saw the family back in court. This is where things get a little weird. The wife of the lawyer who was representing Sam in the trial became the subject of harassment. Death threats made for magazine cutouts, rocks thrown through bedroom windows with notes attached, poisoned meat thrown into their backyard to poison their dog 3 times, and eerie phone calls are only a glimpse into the harassment. The threats called her out by name, stating that if her husband didn't stop representing Sam, she would end up like Eva Schoen. The harassment continued to escalate until it came to a devastating head. The lawyer was at work when he got a call. His house had been burned to the ground. The person responsible was never found. The opposing side, U-Haul, still under the control of Joe and Mark, claimed to not have any information regarding the harassment, but again called for the public to come forward with any relevant information. Either way, Sam's lawyer was never persuaded to quit and continued representing Sam until their win in court. The legal proceedings between the two sides of the family continued for some time, and Joe and Mark were officially cleared of any suspicion of Eva's murder when a man admitted to the crime in 1994. He claimed it was a burglary gone wrong and was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Yet, like Mark had foretold, the bad blood didn't end with their father. All of the ins and outs of the court proceedings are quite tangled and murky, but in the end, Joe remained in control of the company. He and Mark have been successfully running the business since their coup in 1986. Unfortunately for LS, his personal demons continued to follow him, and on October 4th, 1999, Leonard Samuel Schoen took his own life. At the time of his suicide, he had lost almost everything. His family weren't speaking, he lived in a small house outside of Las Vegas where he spent his days writing letters to his children and keeping a low profile. The story behind U-Haul is a messy one, and despite all of the inter-family squabbles, court battles, staged coup, murder, harassment, and ultimate suicide of the founder, the business is still going strong today, with a net worth of $10.87 billion.